Welcome back into Clay and Buck. Our friend Steve Hilton joins us now. He's a political commentator. You know him from Fox. He's an author as well. New book out this week, Califailure, Reversing the Ruin of America's Worst Run State. Hey, Steve, great to have you on the program.
Hi guys, great to be with you. What fun. Can I tell you what a pleasure it is? And guess who wouldn't have me on his new podcast to talk about whether or not California is the worst run state in America? Gavin Newsom. What a shame. But it's very good to be here with you.
Well, we're not surprised that Gavin Newsom wouldn't have you on, given that you recognize the problems not just of California, but specifically of Gavin Newsom's leadership. But I wonder, Steve, is it just the way it's going to be there? I mean, one of the problems that we see is the willingness to suffer for ideological reasons in some of these Democrat
Yes.
enclaves. Definitely in the case of cities like San Francisco, for example, or even New York, unfortunately, is much higher than a lot of people would imagine.
Well, you're right. And ideological is the word. That is why we're in such a mess, with the highest rate of poverty, the highest housing cost, the lowest home ownership, highest cost for gas, electricity, water, everything. It's a disaster. The worst business climate. I mean, that's the point, really, which is that, of course, across the country, we see the video of the unbelievable homeless encampments and people wandering around like zombies and the crime and toothpaste locked up in Walgreens and now the fires, and people see all that, but actually the underlying problems are even worse. It's a failure on every front, and people have been putting up with it, and it's driven by ideology. And that's one of the things in the book I go into, like, what is this ideology? It's not enough to just call it leftism. There's so many different components to it, and we've got to understand it because it's going to spread across the country. That's what's been happening. And if you look at where the Democrats are today, that seems to be where they're gravitating. The Bernie AOC thing, that's where the energy is. That's what we've got in California. Now, to your question about change, I think people are waking up. You saw it even before the fires. If you look at the results last November in the presidential election, even without obviously competing in California particularly, because you're never going to get the electoral votes, Donald Trump got more votes than any Republican for a generation in California. You saw 10 counties flip from blue to red, including big counties like Fresno County, the fifth biggest city. And now with the fires, I mean, I meet people all the time in Los Angeles, Democrats, independents, who say we can't go on like this. It is just obvious that we need a change. We need some balance. It's been this one-party rule for so long. We got to get some common sense ideas back in there.
Appreciate you coming on, Steve. Buck and I talk about this a lot. It's not just that California has fallen apart. It's that, and I'm curious what your experience was growing up and what you thought about California. I just came back from San Francisco. It is a beautiful geographic
Yes.
jewel, the likes there are not very many of anywhere in the world. LA, obviously, nearly perfect climate. You go on up the coast, Seattle, Portland. It's that left-leaning ideas have destroyed some of the most beloved communities in much of the country. What did you think about California as a kid growing up far from
Yeah.
California? And when did your perception start to change? Because I remember as a college kid, I had never been to California before. I remember going out, I don't know, probably 2000 thereabouts, and just being blown away by how spectacular it was.
Yeah,
It seems to have really fallen apart only in the last 10 or 15 years. And I know many
exactly.
Californians who've lived there feel the same way.
So I'll tell you a story about that. So I was totally inspired. The way I put it, I was in love with California even before we moved here. We moved in
Yes.
2012. I got my citizenship 4 years ago. So now I'm a proud American, but also a proud Californian. I love California. In fact, the story about this is back in the day when I was working for David Cameron. This is before he became prime minister. And I was leading our policy development, our political strategy. And there was a cover story in the Spectator magazine. We all know the Spectator website here. In America, it's actually a printed magazine, the oldest in the world, actually, the political magazine in the UK. They did a cover story on the direction that we were working on for the Conservative Party. And the headline on the story was California Dreaming. And the first lines go on about Steve Hilton, David Cameron's policy guru, is inspired by California, and the theme of their policy work is to make the UK more like California. Like, this is like 15, 20 years ago. And the question is, like, is there any political advisor to any politician anywhere in the world who would want to make their country more like California today? And it shows you just how far we've fallen, how quickly with this far left ideology dominant in California. But Actually, the point is all the problems of California are self-inflicted, and we can turn it around. And actually, part two of the book is called Califailure, but part two of the book is called Califuture. And that is my plan for how we actually turn things around and restore California to what it should be, which is the best of America, not the worst, which is what it is now.
Now, you didn't go on Gavin Newsom's podcast, but I want you, to the degree that you can, be as objective as you can in telling us, is this guy going to be the leader of the Democrat Party in the next election cycle? Do you see him being able to swindle enough people in the middle that he's able to rise through the ranks and go from being governor to presidential nominee? Because from what I see, he has had some right-wing people on his podcast,
Yes.
and he's not abandoning the crazy left positions, but he's at least putting on a show of, I'll have a conversation. I'm not that crazy.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you should not underestimate him. I know him a little bit, obviously watched him closely. And that's the point about him, is that he is, like Kamala Harris before, like Joe Biden, like Karen Bass. These are machine politicians. Okay, and they will say whatever is politically expedient. But Gavin Newsom says it better than most. And so don't underestimate him. In a way, that's why I wanted, not partly, why I wanted to write the book, is like, this is the record that he's presided over. It's a total failure on every front. So yes, you can talk. I mean, a good example, the difference between talk and action. So he's on, has Charlie Kirk on and agrees how unfair it is. Deeply unfair was his phrase about, biological men and girls sports. What's he doing about it? Nothing. He's the governor now. Next week in the state legislature, there are 2 bills up for a vote that would stop this madness. Is he going to wait? So far, he's avoided even talking about it. So you got to pin him down on the actions. And the actions that have happened in California have been a complete disaster.
Putting out fires seems like maybe the number one thing that people would expect a government to be capable of and expect a government to be responsible for. The fire situation in the Los Angeles area seems to have been, for many people, a recognition that the policy choices they make, Karen Bass, for instance, as mayor, have consequences. Do you get the sense that that could change political voting behavior?
Yeah.
Or is it so ideologically committed at this point that people would have to recognize that they made poor choices, and lots of people don't want to acknowledge mistake? How do you get them to change, and how did the fires potentially impact that?
Well, that's the job of campaigning, and to bring that home. I mean, I can tell you right now, I'm working with Nicole Shanahan on a recall campaign for Karen Bass, because every day that she's there is a disaster. And one of the reasons that we're doing that is to show, if we can pull it off, that the Democrat machine in California, that kind of Democrat industrial complex of the unions that fund the politicians and the far left activists and the bureaucrats and all that it can be beaten. And if we can do it there in Los Angeles for Karen Bass, I think that's a very encouraging sign that people are ready for change. Look, if we don't pull it off, I still think we need to fight. We need to make sure that people understand. I'll give you a story which is really encouraging. Huntington Beach, not the biggest city in California, an iconic one, Surf City, USA. So just over 4 years ago, the council in Huntington Beach was 6-1 Democrat. A friend of mine, Tony Strickland, put together a team of strong candidates. In 2022, they took control of the council 4-3 on a very strong conservative platform. They then implemented that. They had a lot of energy, just like you're seeing from President Trump right now. They cleaned up the streets. They cleaned homeless encampments. They prosecuted crime. They dealt with the nonsense in the schools and the libraries. They actually put in a ballot initiative for voter ID, which passed. Then, in November just now, in 2024, they put forward 7 candidates as a slate. They called themselves the Magnificent Seven, to show you where they were coming from. They had a clean sweep. They won all the seats. So in 4 years, that city has gone from 6-1 Democrat control to 7-0 Republican. So it shows what can be done if you actually fight. And I think that's what we need to show across California. That's why I really do believe change is possible sooner than many people think.
Steve Hilton, everybody, go check out the book Califailure, which also goes into Califuture. So it's not just the problems, it's also the fix. And Steve, best of luck to you. Please come back and tell us how it's all going, and hang out with us again soon.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys. See you soon.
Steve does great work, and it would be transformative for the nation if sane Republicans or just even sane independents could start to get into positions of power all over California. And I do think there's a frustration over Democrat failures in the meantime. So it's an interesting book idea. Look, my beloved University of Tennessee Volunteers are about to make my boss, Julie Tabbitt, cry because she is a graduate of the University of Kentucky. But if you disagree with that, maybe you love a lot of the Kentucky Wildcat players. Maybe you think they're going to go off and win a third time this year against the University of Tennessee. PrizePicks has an app for that. You can dive in and pick the top Kentucky players to have more than expected in all of their different performances. And maybe you're out there right now and you're a big Auburn Tiger fan, or maybe you're a Michigan Wolverine like my wife. You've got all sorts of teams going on with the Sweet 16 underway. Ole Miss, we had a caller say hotty toddy a little bit earlier. Ole Miss Rebels playing today as well. 4 great games in the Sweet 16, 2 Elite 8 on Saturday, 2 Elite 8 on Sunday, plus Major League Baseball is all back. You can play PrizePicks in California. You can play it in Texas. You can play it in Georgia if you're feeling a little bit left out. 13 million people, in fact, have signed up to play. They now offer MasterCard, Visa, Discover Card, quick and easy deposits into an account. You can get hooked up right now. Major League Baseball, the March Madness, the NBA, whatever you love, golf, you can get hooked up and play with PrizePicks. PrizePicks.com, code CLAY for $50 when you play your first $5 picks. PrizePicks.com, code CLAY. That is PrizePicks.com, code CLAY.